So let's talk about these polls that taken a year out from the election that I would say don't really mean anything on who's going to ultimately win. But if I were...
What are they, a snapshot into...
Snapshot of where people are right now. But if I were on the Biden campaign or any campaign that got these type of polls, I'd love them because I would be using them to get everybody working from the top to bottom, get them working as hard as they can to double their efforts on these areas that there's some, we're seeing some softness again a year out. So these are actually, somebody said this yesterday, and I'm sure Jim Messina and others who come on the show would say the same thing. Use these polls as a way to inspire your troops to work harder, work longer, campaign more, especially when you got an autocrat running against you and nothing short of American democracy's on the line. If that can't inspire you,
I don't know what does, but
go into professional bowling.
The polling shows President Biden is losing support among black voters. The White House is vowing not to, quote, make the mistake of underestimating a key group that helped propel Biden to victory in 2020. In a new interview with NBC News, Biden's principal deputy campaign manager acknowledged that for the president to win again in 2024, his team, quote, has to have a long, sustained conversations with African Americans in their communities and can't simply, quote, parachute in around election time.
No.
This comes after a recent survey from the New York Times and Siena College showed Biden ceding support from black battleground state voters to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. For more on that, let's bring in opinion editor at The Washington Post, Alexi McCammond. Her latest piece is entitled, Democrats Need to Get Real, about RFK Jr.'s strength with black voters. Alexi, where is it coming from?
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me. I mean, I think what Joe said is right. So a couple of disclaimers off the top. Polls are not gospel. It's a year out, and black voters are not a monolith. But one thing that is clear in polling trends, focus group trends, and otherwise is that black voters and other voters are looking for an alternative. Black voters have long felt and said and showed us that they feel taken for granted by the Democratic Party. We've seen the ways in which VP Harris hasn't been supported as much as some folks would like by the Democratic Party, by President Biden. And the real kicker with RFK Jr., and something that is particularly unique to him, is that he taps into this deep-seated, deep-rooted medical skepticism that a lot of black folks across the country feel, rightfully so. There has been medical racism going back, to the 1800s through now. There is ample reason why folks might feel distrustful of their healthcare providers or of what even the government is telling us we should do with our bodies with respect to vaccines. Now, that is not to say that everything RFK Jr. says about vaccines is directly appealing to black voters, but when he talks about these things and brings up the idea that actually maybe they're lying to you or maybe you shouldn't take this vaccine, he's really trying to get at what other folks aren't saying to these voters, which is, I hear you, I see you, I understand why you might feel this way.
Rev, curious about your thoughts. I know you have a question for Alexi, but first, can you respond to that about Kennedy playing into a deep skepticism that a lot of members of the black community have of the medical community?
No, he has definitely played into that, and there is definitely a skepticism, no matter how much we may feel that it is unfounded. People have real skepticism based on history, Tuskegee experiment just being one, about vaccines, and Robert Jr. has played into that. He's also been one that's been a hero in the environmental movement, environmental racism, that many of us supported his raising that prior to his running. But having said that, Alexi, the fact that a lot of the bizarre stuff, both politically as well as in terms of policy, that Robert has brought out has not been really confronted or countered by the Biden administration. So don't you think that some of what Robert's growing popularity or growing support among some blacks is because he's not been challenged by the Biden supporters on some of the things that he says that are completely out of line with the way a lot of blacks think?
I think yes and no. Yes, because when he was briefly running in the Democratic primary against Biden, he was getting a lot of attention. We were all giving him a lot of attention for, the things he was saying at private dinners and otherwise about vaccines, casting doubt on these things, and about some of the more outlandish views he had. And that obviously dipped support with some Democratic voters at the time. I think the smartest thing he's done is get out of that primary and run as an independent, because it takes the heat off of him from the major parties. I know that Joe Biden's campaign doesn't even really want to take him seriously. They think and maintain that voters will see this as a two-person race between Biden and Donald Trump. Everything suggests otherwise at this point, that voters are looking for alternatives, that they want it to be anyone but Biden and Trump. And I think that, black voters are hearing a lot from RFK Jr. about other things beyond vaccines. And I think that's the big issue. He's couching a lot of this stuff in terms of civil rights, as I'm sure you know, Rev. And he's also talking a lot like Milei, who was just elected in Argentina, this sort of populist rhetoric that's painting a very hopeful vision for the future. And he's not really focusing on those other sort of outlandish things. And so, to your point, sure, maybe if Democrats focused on those things, people would be more aware and maybe reconsider or think more holistically about who he is. But he's really staying away from those things. And the Biden campaign so far is sort of considering him as a non-starter.
Jonathan, let me hear a few things. First of all, there is the obstacle of Robert Kennedy Jr. getting on the ballot on a lot of states. We'll actually see as we move forward whether he's going to be able to do that or not. As an independent, he certainly has more time to clear the hurdles if he decides that he wants to do that. But I find Alexi's reporting fascinating, because you actually have Kennedy. You have two stories here, a tale of two stories. One, he takes away from Donald Trump more than Biden in many polls that we've seen, despite the fact he takes one of the most critical electorates. He takes a good chunk of one of the most critical electorates away from Joe Biden. That is black voters. Of course, it is early. And I suspect that what will happen this year is what happens every year. Though there can be a change, that people come home, whether it's young voters, whether it's people of color. All of these outlandish predictions I heard going into the 2020 election ended up being outlandish. I suspect the same will be true here. But the Biden campaign does have to worry about this, don't they?
Biden campaign officials are deeply worried about third-party candidates. Though they don't want to give them much in the way of oxygen by talking about them, at least not now. Still believing that many of them will eventually drop out between now and when the ballots are actually cast. But you're right, RFK Jr. Appeals to sort of the conspiracy theorist group that draws from Trump. But yes, maybe black voters from Biden. And of course, he's not the only potential third-party candidate. Jill Stein, Cornel West, who might have some appeal to black voters. Joe Manchin is also considering getting in, maybe under the no labels banner. So, Alexi, we know that the third-party candidates are a threat, but there's also an issue about enthusiasm, particularly among voters of color. That's something that the Biden team has struggled with. Even in 2020, they ran behind what previous Democrats have done. And I think there are real concerns about this time around as well. So, in terms of Democratic officials you speak to, how worried are they, and what can the Biden team do to energize young voters, but particularly young voters of color?
Yeah, I mean, the statements from Quentin Fulks and others from the Biden campaign show that they are keenly aware of what they need to do, which is not take them for granted and not parachute in, as he said, in the 11th hour. That is clear. I think the problem is that a lot of this is sort of baked in the cake. I mean, you look at the relationship between Biden and VP Harris, and I know that a lot of black folks would have liked to see more support for her throughout this first term from Biden and other Democrats, and that's something you can't really undo. Biden also needs to give these folks a reason to be excited, a reason to vote for him. And a lot of voters are sick of casting a throwaway ballot, or what they say is a ballot for the lesser of two evils. And that's one of the big differences between, I think, 2016, 2020, and 2024. I think especially after the COVID pandemic, people feel much more individualistic. They're much more concerned about themselves than they are with group affiliation. That diminishes Democratic Party loyalty loyalty, that diminishes loyalty folks might have had to Biden in the past, thinking he would do the right thing. So it's more than just saying the right thing. And I think lastly, VP Harris has been the one, if you look at these same polls, who's keeping Biden in the game. I mean, she's getting support with younger voters, with voters of color, these constituencies that they need to win to keep that coalition together. That was surprising from those polls. I know that a lot of folks, we were sort of thinking she wouldn't have a strong coalition, just as she didn't in 2020. But she's been going on these college campus tours and talking to these people that the Biden folks need to do a better effort putting Biden in front of.
Opinion editor at the Washington Post, Alexi McCammon, thank you very much. Nice work. We appreciate having you on. Still